For decades, the CIA has been quietly sitting on documents, highly classified files, that point to something absolutely insane: the pole shift. We're not talking about a small climate change here. We're talking about a total flip of the Earth's poles. North becomes south and vice versa. And guess what? Every time this happens, civilizations get wiped out. Think about that. Entire cultures gone in the blink of an eye, without warning. It's happened before. Ancient civilizations, like the ones we only hear whispers about, maybe Atlantis. Some people believe they were wiped out by this exact phenomenon. The Earth's magnetic field just shifted. Global destruction. We're talking earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanic eruptions, complete devastation. And not over centuries, but in a matter of days or weeks. Now, here's where it gets even crazier. According to these classified files, scientists have been tracking these events. They've seen evidence of rapid magnetic pole shifts in the past, undeniable geological proof. These pole shifts correspond with massive extinction events throughout history. We're not talking conspiracy theories here. This is backed by hard data, but no one's talking about it. Why? Because if people knew how close we might be to another pole shift, mass panic would break out. So, they bury it. But that's not all. What if this isn't just some natural, cosmic event? Some theorists are saying that advanced civilizations, either human or something else, may have known about this cycle. What if they even manipulated it? Think about it. If you had the power to trigger or avoid a catastrophe, wouldn't you? And what if governments today have access to that knowledge and they're preparing? Maybe that's why we see underground bunkers being built all over the world. Secret survival plans that only the elite know about. Look, the real question here is, why would the CIA classify this information? If it's just some wild theory, why hide it from the public? The fact that they've locked these files away for so long should make you wonder, what aren't they telling us? And here's the kicker: some scientists believe we're overdue for another pole shift. The signs are there: the magnetic field is weakening, the poles are drifting faster than they have in centuries. If it happens, we're not just talking about some rough weather. We're talking about a complete collapse of modern society. Power grids fail. Satellites go offline. Chaos everywhere. Now, everybody's heard the legend of Atlantis, right? That super advanced civilization that just vanished one day, swallowed by the sea. It's one of those stories that's been passed down for centuries, but here's the thing: what if it's more than just a legend? What if Atlantis was real, and what if it wasn't just some freak accident that wiped them out? There's a growing theory that Atlantis and other lost civilizations might have been taken out by something far bigger, something like a pole shift. We're not talking about an invasion, not some natural disaster like a hurricane or a volcano. This would have been global. A cataclysm that reset everything. It wasn't just a city getting flooded, it was the Earth itself, shifting in a way that no technology, no amount of planning, could stop. Think about what Plato said when he wrote about Atlantis. He described it as this utopia with insane technology, advanced architecture, a powerhouse in trade. They had it all, right? Then, in a matter of hours, it was gone. Doesn't that sound suspiciously like something wiped them out in one big swoop? A flood, earthquakes, sounds a lot like the kind of destruction a pole shift would cause. And it's not just Atlantis. We're talking about entire civilizations that seem to have disappeared without a trace. You ever hear about the Mohenjo-Daro in ancient India? It was one of the most advanced cities in the world at the time, gone. Then there's the Olmecs in Mesoamerica, another highly developed society that just kind of vanished off the face of the earth. There's no clear reason why. These weren't small tribes either. These were massive, sophisticated cultures with infrastructure, trade, science, and then nothing. There are ruins all over the world that hint at civilizations far older and more advanced than we're usually taught. Sites like Göbekli Tepe, these places challenge the conventional timeline of human history. It's almost like there was a reset. What could have caused that reset? Look, if you piece it together with what we now know about pole shifts and how devastating they are, it starts to make sense. What's also wild is the geological evidence. In Antarctica, under all that ice, they found evidence of ancient forests and rivers. That place wasn't always frozen. So, what changed? A pole shift would explain how places that were once thriving ended up in conditions they couldn't survive. It's like Mother Nature just hit a switch and everything flipped. Here's the kicker: what if civilizations like Atlantis were aware of this? What if they knew a pole shift was coming and couldn't do anything to stop it? Maybe they tried. Maybe some of those underground cities we've discovered, like Derinkuy in Turkey, were built to survive it. Maybe not everyone got wiped out. The survivors could have gone underground, waited it out, and then started over. What if we've misunderstood ancient texts all along? What if the great floods and fire from the sky in mythologies across the world are actually descriptions of these catastrophic events? A pole shift, causing chaos everywhere, could explain why we see the same stories repeating in different cultures separated by thousands of miles and years. Let's get into some hard science now. We know Earth has seen multiple mass extinction events. We're talking about the dinosaurs, right? But that's just one of many. 5 major extinction events have rocked this planet, each wiping out a huge chunk of life. What doesn't get enough attention is the possibility that some of these extinctions were triggered by, you guessed it, a pole shift. Take the Permian-Triassic extinction, sometimes called the Great Dying. Around 250 million years ago, 90% of all species were wiped out. 90%! The entire planet hit the reset button, and we still don't fully understand what caused it. Sure, scientists speculate about volcanic activity, massive methane releases, but one strong contender is a pole shift. Think about the kind of chaos that would unleash: continents moving, climates flipping, the oceans turning inside out, literally a nightmare for anything alive back then. It's not just the Permian extinction, though. What about the Ordovician-Silurian extinction? Another mass wipeout. Again, scientists are looking at various causes, but we've got geological evidence that suggests there was a major disruption in Earth's magnetic field around that time. Coincidence? Maybe. But when you keep seeing these massive events happening alongside signs of magnetic chaos, you've got to ask some tough questions. Now, I know some people like to blame asteroids or supervolcanoes, and yeah, those can definitely wreak havoc. But a pole shift? That's on a whole different level. We're talking about altering the entire planet's magnetic and geographic orientation. Imagine how fast the climate would change. You've got ice caps melting, seas rising, habitats completely destroyed, all happening way too quickly for species to adapt. And if the species can't adapt, they go extinct. Here's another thing. When we look at the fossil record, we see periods where species just vanish, right? Like they were thriving one moment, and then, poof, gone. A pole shift could explain why we see such sharp, abrupt changes. It's not like life faded out over millennia. In some cases, it looks like something came along and hit the off switch. A pole shift fits that profile. And it's not just about life on land. Look at the oceanic extinctions. Pole shifts don't just mess with the weather, they mess with ocean currents, which are critical for marine ecosystems. If those currents get thrown out of balance, entire species of fish, coral, plankton, gone. And when the base of the food chain collapses, everything else follows. We've also got evidence of rapid climate swings in the geological record. Ice ages starting and ending almost overnight, deserts turning into lush forests, and vice versa. A pole shift could do that. If the planet's magnetic field shifts, you're not just talking about temperature changes, you're talking about a whole new set of rules for survival. Alright, let's break this down. You know the story: Adam, Eve, the Garden of Eden, the forbidden fruit. It's one of the oldest tales in human history. But what if we've been looking at it all wrong? What if Adam and Eve weren't just the first humans in some mythical paradise? What if they were survivors of a massive global catastrophe, like a pole shift, that resets civilization as we know it. The story of Adam and Eve has all the elements of a reset narrative. They start in a perfect place, Eden, right? But then everything goes wrong, and they're cast out into a harsh, unforgiving world. What if Eden represents a pre-cataclysmic civilization, one that was advanced, thriving, and then, boom, it's gone? A pole shift could have wiped out everything, leaving only a handful of survivors. Adam and Eve could have been two of those survivors, forced to rebuild in a new, chaotic environment. In the story, the forbidden fruit gives them knowledge of good and evil. What if that's symbolic of the survivors learning about the dangerous, unpredictable world they now had to navigate? Maybe that knowledge wasn't just about morality, it could have been about the brutal realities of post-cataclysm life. They went from living in a stable, advanced society to barely surviving in a world that had been turned upside down. Think about how the story emphasizes that Adam and Eve had to toil for food after they were cast out. That could be a reference to the massive environmental changes following a pole shift. The world they knew, one where agriculture, technology, and civilization flourished, was destroyed. They had to start over from scratch, learning how to survive in a completely different climate, with none of the resources or comforts they had before. Some ancient texts outside the Bible, like the Sumerian myths, talk about a similar story, humans being created or saved after a global catastrophe. Some versions even mention advanced beings, maybe extraterrestrials or gods, helping humanity restart. Could Adam and Eve have been part of a restart program? Maybe they weren't the first humans ever, but the first of a new generation after the previous one was wiped out. And what about the serpent in the garden? In the traditional story, the serpent is this evil force that tempts Eve, right? But in some interpretations, the serpent is seen as a symbol of wisdom and transformation. What if the serpent wasn't the bad guy, but a figure representing the new knowledge that Adam and Eve needed to survive? After all, they were no longer in Eden, they were in a world that required them to adapt, to evolve. That's what knowledge does. It forces change. So, let's talk about the big question here. Why would the CIA, or any government agency for that matter, classify documents about pole shifts? I mean, if it's all just ancient history or some natural event that happens every few million years, why bother keeping it under wraps? There's something they don't want us to know, and it's not just about ancient civilizations disappearing. It's about right now, what it means for us, today. These documents didn't just talk about past events. They contain detailed analyses, maps, and predictions for future pole shifts. We're talking about real, current data showing how the Earth's magnetic field has been acting erratically. Magnetic north is shifting faster than ever before in recorded history. It's not just drifting a few inches a year like it used to, it's moving miles. You can't ignore that. So, why hasn't this made front-page news? Well, think about the consequences. If the government came out and said, hey, we've got evidence that a pole shift could happen soon, and when it does, we're looking at global chaos, how would people react? There'd be panic on a massive scale. The stock market would crash, supply chains would break down, and people would start hoarding food, water, everything. It would be the apocalypse before the actual apocalypse. And that's just the economic and social fallout. What about the scientific community? If this information became public, it would spark a revolution in how we understand geology, climate science, and even history. The mainstream narrative of gradual, slow-moving changes would be completely upended. The idea that entire civilizations were wiped out by these shifts would no longer be some fringe theory, it'd be a historical fact. Here's another angle. Governments, especially superpowers, aren't just sitting back, crossing their fingers, hoping this doesn't happen. They're preparing. Underground bunkers, secret storage facilities, contingency plans, these aren't sci-fi conspiracy theories, this stuff is real. We know they exist. The question is, who gets to use them when the time comes? Spoiler alert, it's probably not going to be you or me. It's going to be the elites, the powerful, the people in control. They've known about this for decades and are preparing for a world that might not include the rest of us. And let's not forget the tech companies and private space programs. Why do you think guys like Elon Musk are obsessed with colonizing Mars? Sure, they talk about exploration and expanding humanity's reach into the stars, but if you knew Earth's environment could radically shift overnight, wouldn't you want a backup plan? A plan B that's off-planet? It makes sense when you put the pieces together. And the last thing the government wants is for us to connect the dots. They don't want us asking why they're building massive underground facilities or why they've been conducting so many classified geological surveys in remote parts of the world. They don't want us questioning why global tech billionaires are dumping billions into off-Earth colonies and deep-sea bunkers. It's all connected. So, here's the burning question: could a pole shift happen in our lifetime? And if it does, are we looking at the same catastrophic fate that wiped out ancient civilizations like Atlantis or the Mohenjo-Daro? The scary answer: we might be closer to that reality than anyone wants to admit. We know the Earth's magnetic poles are already shifting faster and faster each year. And it's not just the poles. We've seen an uptick in extreme weather, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, natural disasters are becoming more frequent and more intense. These aren't just coincidences. The Earth's magnetic field is weakening, and when that happens, all hell breaks loose. Magnetic fields protect us from solar radiation, and when that shield starts to fail, it messes with everything: our climate, our technology, even our power grids. Speaking of technology, that's where things get really dangerous for us. We're living in a world that's completely dependent on satellites, GPS, and the electrical grid. A pole shift wouldn't just throw nature into chaos, it would knock out the systems we rely on for, well, everything. GPS would go haywire, communication satellites could fail, and entire electrical grids could fry. We're talking about instant blackouts, planes losing navigation, and cities plunged into darkness. No internet, no banking, no modern conveniences, none of it. Think about how fragile our society is when you take away electricity for a week. Now imagine that on a global scale. No power for months, maybe years. How long do you think it would take for people to lose their minds? For governments to collapse? We're not just talking about inconvenience, we're talking about societal breakdown. And that's assuming the physical world doesn't turn into a nightmare scenario of earthquakes, floods, and wildfires at the same time. But it's not just about survival. There's the psychological impact. Unlike ancient civilizations that may have faced these shifts with simpler lives, we're looking at a modern society that's completely disconnected from basic survival skills. How many of us know how to grow food, purify water, or make a fire without Google telling us how? The truth is, we've built our modern world on a foundation of technology that could crumble overnight. And most people aren't ready for that reality. And look, governments know this. That's why they've been making all these preparations behind the scenes. But here's the kicker: they're not telling you. Why? Because they know most of us wouldn't be able to handle it. They don't want a global panic on their hands. So, instead, they prepare in silence, hoping that if, or when, this happens, they'll have enough control over the chaos to stay on top. Meanwhile, what are we doing? Nothing. Because we've been led to believe everything's fine, that the world isn't on the edge of a disaster that could set us back hundreds, maybe thousands of years. But the signs are there. The magnetic field is shifting, the environment is reacting, and the systems we rely on are more fragile than anyone wants to admit. Alright, so now we've laid everything out on the table: the pole shifts, the mass extinctions, the hidden documents, and the fate of lost civilizations. The big question is, can we stop this from happening to us? Or are we already in too deep? First off, let's be real. We can't stop a pole shift. This is a natural process, a cosmic event that's been happening for millions of years. The Earth doesn't care about our technology, our cities, or our politics. It's going to do what it does. So no, we're not going to hit some magic button and make it go away. But here's the thing, knowing what's coming gives us a head start. The ancients didn't have that luxury. They didn't understand the science behind it, they couldn't see it coming. But we can. The real question is, what are we going to do about it? Governments are already making moves, building underground bunkers, storing food and resources, preparing for the worst. But what about the rest of us? Will we be left out in the cold? Probably. Unless we start demanding answers, pushing for transparency, and preparing ourselves, we could be the ones left standing in the chaos while the elites retreat to their safe havens. Humanity has been through massive changes before, and we've survived, even thrived. The pole shift might be the biggest challenge we've ever faced, but it's also an opportunity. An opportunity to rethink how we live, how we interact with our planet, and how we prepare for the future. The real threat isn't just the pole shift, it's how unprepared we are for the aftermath. So, where do we go from here? That's the real question we need to ask ourselves. The world is changing, and fast. The people in power already know it, and they're getting ready. We need to wake up, stay informed, and be ready to adapt. History shows us that those who prepare, those who are ready to evolve, are the ones who survive. Thank you so much for sticking around until the end of this video. We really appreciate your time, and if this blew your mind, go ahead and hit that like button. Drop a comment down below. What do you think about the pole shift theory? We'd love to hear your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. God bless us all.